Recording in progress.
Hi, Ernest. Hi, you're busy. Hi, everyone. How are you? Oh, you're busy. I didn't know that you enjoy music like that.
Oh, yes, I do. And thanks to whoever selected that music. I'm enjoying it. Yeah,
Sure,
I mean,
sure.
just to tell colleagues that, please enjoy the music for some 1, 2, 3 minutes, and
Sure.
we'll give other colleagues 3 minutes to join. And at the dot of 12:33, my time, and
Right.
I will start. Okay?
All right.
So enjoy the music.
Right.
Yes, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from wherever you're joining us from. And I hope you enjoyed that cool music that is helping to set the scene. Interesting time to be around and in the world today. We're here today discussing a very important topic and a timely topic at that as well. My pleasure to be able to introduce this panel. My name is ABC Luche and I work with the Nigerian Network of NGOs. And the session today, we'll be talking about building financial trust and resilience for NGOs in the post-USAID uh, funding, post-USAID funding. When you look at the situation that we have at this time, um, I was part of a recent survey by the EUC, and it shows that 67% of civil society organizations across 60 countries have been directly affected by the USAID funding decision. 40% of impacted organizations have lost between 25 to 50% of their budgets. And when you look at programs that have been affected, you find human rights, democracy, gender equality, and health are the most thematic areas where you've seen a lot of impact of the funding. So the conversations today will help us to see how can we, as nonprofits, build the needed financial resilience, financial trust, and resilience for our organizations. And I have very good experts who will take us through the journey. I have Samantha Musoke, who is already on the call, and also my brother and friend, Ernest Yimai, who is also on the call as well. And both of them are my very good brother and sister and very knowledgeable in this conversation. The way the session would run today is that after this brief introduction and overview of the sessions, I would have Samantha making presentation on building financial trust, international nonprofit accounting standard. Then we'll have a breakout session, which would again be moderated by Samantha. Then after the breakout, we'll have discussion. And then we'll go to the second presentation, again by Samantha. Then we'll now listen to experience with how shrinking funding space and locally funding initiatives can help all of us to build the needed resilience. After that presentation from my brother Ernest, we'll then move to question and answer session, and then we'll close for the day. That's the run of play for today, and I'm sure Samantha is already ready. I'll allow Samantha to take it up from me and to also properly introduce herself. Samantha, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. Good day, everybody. I'm incredibly honored to be here. I have to say I'm slightly nervous about the level of expectation that there might be from this event. And I know that many organizations are in huge financial difficulty. I can't promise to deliver any sort of magic bullet, magic pill that's going to solve so much financial woe, and I'm sure you weren't expecting that. But I am really excited about having a conversation about how to build financial resilience and trust, which is going to be essential in the new landscape we find ourselves in. So my name is Samantha Musoke. I am from England. I'm a chartered accountant from England, but I've been living in Uganda for the last 25 years, since 2001. I'm married to a Ugandan, which is how I have this lovely African name. And I've been delighted to be able to work with Mr. Oyebisi and Ernest in their respective capacities with their organizations over recent years as we've been working on this project. I work for Humentum, which is a non-profit that supports the development and humanitarian sector, if we want to call it that still, in being more equitable, resilient, and accountable. We don't implement programs, but we have membership and convenings and training and consultancy, all with a view to making the sector work better. So this is quite an exciting and interesting, albeit devastating, complicated, rich, complex moment in history that we find ourselves in. So with that, if you are watching in Portuguese, I think there's something in the chat. You can view auto-translated captions. In Zoom, you can download the slides. There's a link in the chat for you to download the slides. And if you can put P at the beginning of your name, in your Zoom name, then we can add you to a Lusophone breakout group when the time comes. Benvenido, benvido. I don't speak Portuguese, I won't pretend. So in terms of the current landscape, I think I've heard so many different angles and takes on this, and I won't pretend to represent everybody in the room. Of course, I'm really interested to hear. There are so many conversations around this. Obviously, the USAID funding has been pulled. We've seen a long-term trend of European bilaterals pulling back, DFID becoming FCDO, other European nations really pulling back their sort of aid and development budgets. And even in response to that, many of the US-based foundations, instead of stepping up and filling the gap, which of course they can't, are playing wait and see, slightly sort of cynical moment of, well, let's see who lives, who survives this event and back the ones that come out at the end of it. So difficult funding environment, to say the least. Most importantly is to mention, of course, the people who are suffering at the front end of anything that's been life-giving and life-changing for them in terms of the work that nonprofits have been doing, that some of work has stopped. Stakeholders and communities are affected. Of course, many local organizations have low levels of reserves because of chronic underfunding of unrestricted and the inability to build reserves. We've seen a lot of layoffs. And we're also seeing these conversations about how do we move forward. There's competition for funds, but also we don't want to turn this into a scramble fest. And we want to be able to build back in a way that is honoring and dignifying to the work that we all care about, rather than all just trying to survive for our own benefit. So a complicated set of mixed emotions and realities. There's also these other sort of long-term, I think, areas to think about, which is obviously the civic space, which has been shrinking in different countries. I think some certain mindsets have been emboldened by different, how should you put it, political outlooks that have been coming from the US, and that's caused some shrinking of civic space. Are we seeing an increase in domestic giving? This is something I was pondering on LinkedIn the other day. Personally, sitting here in Uganda, I'm getting more requests from local organizations saying, will you donate? Will you donate? Which I didn't get so many of in the past. So, but I haven't seen any data about whether, domestic African philanthropy is growing, if more people are feeling the will and desire to give to local organizations. And then, of course, I think it's also important to mention the long-term lens of the FATF regulations, the anti-money laundering, the absolutely vital need for the nonprofit space to demonstrate its trust and accountability, and its openness to being appropriately regulated, so that we have trust within our communities and the societies in which we're operating. So, as I said, Humentum, we've been holding spaces for some of the sense making and futures thinking. Build back better was a kind of catchword after COVID, wasn't it? We don't want just to recreate. There was so much that was wrong with the international aid and development sector. So many problems that we've been trying to fix little by little, slowly over time. Is this a horrific opportunity to rebuild in a completely different way, something that's much more equitable, much more resilient, much more accountable? In fact, just the other day, I was chatting to my border driver outside, and he said, this is the best thing that's ever happened to Africa. Sure, people will die, but it means that we won't be so dependent. I was like, whoa, okay. And I've heard that, and I'm sure you've heard that kind of thinking from different places as well. I even saw it on Al Jazeera the other day. So there's lots of different angles and ways to look at this reality that we're in. And I hope I haven't said anything out of turn, just in acknowledging there are lots of different ways that this is being seen. But we're here today to talk about financial resilience. And as I said, this is something that's been at the heart of Humentum's mission and vision for a long time. We actually run a training course, which is all about building financial sustainability. And these are the 4 elements in that training course. And I don't think it changes. The fact that we're in a sort of crisis moment doesn't change the truth of the fact that these are the building blocks of financial sustainability and resilience. So I'm going to talk a little bit about each of these. Healthy funding mix, having sufficient unrestricted and flexible income, having adequate reserves, and building and taking advantage of strong stakeholder relationships. Of course, the best time to plant a tree is 10 years ago. The best time to invest in financial sustainability is before crisis hits. Nonetheless, we are here. So let's talk about how to build it. So when we think about funding mix, it's about looking at the spectrum between short-term and long-term income, and also the spectrum between completely restricted through to varying degrees of flexible, up to completely unrestricted income. And if you think about the type of income your organization has had or been able to get, quite often we've had a good chunk of, sometimes in the 90% of income, down in the bottom left-hand quadrant, which is the worst quality quadrant, short-term, but highly restricted income. So not all income is equal, just the dollar value on the income isn't the same as its quality. The quantity and the quality of income are two different things. And one other thing that we teach in the course is the importance of matching different types of income to different types of expenditure. So for example, if you've got long-term restricted income, something like a 5-year program grant, that's pretty good type of income to fund long-term programs. It's pretty much suited to that type of expenditure. If we look at short-term projects, well, our short-term restricted grants are quite good for that type of work, but we don't always want to be doing only that type of work. But if that's the type of work you're doing, then that kind of income is well suited to paying for that. When it comes to paying for things like support costs, or otherwise known as administration costs, indirect overheads, these foundational costs that organizations need to exist and be functional. And even when it comes to paying for the efforts of fundraising, that comes with a cost. It's better to use longer term unrestricted income to pay for those kinds of costs, because they're not sexy. People don't like paying for them, and yet they're vitally necessary. And they are long-term costs. They're not come and go. They're not flash in the pan one-off costs. They're often long-term costs that your organization needs. And then finally, if you've got short-term unrestricted, maybe one-off donations or events and that sort of thing, those can be really good for building your reserves. You don't want to use short-term unrestricted income to be paying for long-term salaries, because there's a mismatch in the nature of the income and expenses. So I found this quite a revelation when I first learned about this idea of matching different types of income to different types of costs. And of course, this is the fundamental problem that many organizations have. We have project-based income and we struggle to get financing for our longer term support costs and fundraising costs. So how do we measure our funding mix? So there's a few ways to measure it. You can talk about donor dependence, how I'm 95% donor dependent or 100% donor dependent. Within that, how many donors? Is that one donor? Are all your eggs in one basket, or is it, 5? Is the income that you've got from those donors good or poor quality? So, or just even not donors, but other. What percentage of your income is unrestricted, whether it's from donors or other sources? Have you got the right level of diversification? I remember sort of 10, 15 years ago, everybody was saying, diversify, like as if it was a, absolute mantra. You've got to get income from as many different sources as possible. And I think there's been a pulling back from that it takes a real effort and energy and expertise to generate some of these different types of income. And if you spread yourself too thin, you don't manage to excel at generating different types. So yes, we need a level of diversification so we don't have over-reliance. That said, you can't spread yourself too thin on too many different types of income, or you can't excel at any of them. And then lastly, this question of matching your income profile to your expense profile and seeing where you've got fundamental mismatches. And that will help with your financial resilience and your financial sort of professionalism, if you like, in the way that your finances are matched. So the second big thing is unrestricted income. We talked about this in the funding mix. It's a crucial element in any kind of resilience. So just spend a minute. What does it look like? Why is it so important? And crucially, how do you get it? So it might look like, well, you don't even have to prepare a separate budget or for specific activities that somebody's just going to give to your organization because they believe what you do. Just no strings attached. Here's $500. Here's $1,000, whatever. It could be a donation. It could also be a grant that they're just giving to support an organization. Can you write your own budget headings, or do you have to use the grantor's budget headings? Even if you have got a budget, do you have ability to reprioritize within that without asking for permission? Can you spend more or less on different activities, more or less on different costs? Is there a long list of things you can't spend money on? You're not allowed this and you're not allowed that. Or are there no, what are they called? Limits on what you can spend it within your own decisions. Are there time limits? Has to be spent after this date and before this date? Have you got options to keep it for longer and spend it over a longer time if you want? Could you choose to spend it on something completely different? So that project ceases to be relevant, a much new or more urgent issue has come up and we need to spend it. Have you got the freedom to do that if you want to? And could you even decide not to spend it? Because actually you're going to say, I'm going to keep this money to build my reserves. I'm not going to spend it. I'm going to put it in reserve. So you can see there's a sort of spectrum of different degrees of flexibility and restriction. And obviously, the more unrestricted you've got, the better. But there is a spectrum. It's not completely black and white. It's so important, and I probably am singing to the choir here. It's vital for autonomy of organizations, for locally led development, for organizations to be able to make their own decisions. It's vital for agility and responsiveness, and nobody can gaze into a crystal ball and make a perfect budget for the next 5 years. Nobody knows. Nobody can do that. Companies don't do that. A budget is a plan of your best guess of how you think it's going to happen, but to be held to that within an inch of your life is really problematic. So we need to have flexibility to be able to be responsive to real world realities. We want to be able to innovate and try out untested things. We want to be able to build our reserves. We can't do that without unrestricted funding. And we also need to be covered these totally necessary but less shiny or attractive costs. So it's absolutely vital. The $1 million question, how do you get it? Now, I'm not a fundraising expert, I'm an accountant, so I won't promise to have all the answers here by any means, but I love the resources from Mighty Ally. If you've come across those, obviously you'll get the link in the deck. But the big mantra from Kevin Brown at Mighty Ally is be fundable and findable. He talks about really narrowing down, talking about what you do and your impact and making the case for your organization in very succinct ways that people can really hook onto. It's a branding and marketing a skill rather than a financial one. So I won't pretend to be an expert there. The other thing, though, is making the case for unrestricted and flexible funding. So if the default has been for funders to give restricted funding, help make the case to say why it would be better for that to be flexible. And I've made a link there to some research and resources from Humentum's website about the value of flexible funding, but there's a lot out there that you could share with your funders to say, I wonder if we could explore this. There is a lot of value in it. You trust us, don't you? Let's talk about having a slightly different framework. Obviously, that depends on the power balance between the grantee and the funder, but that's what we're all here to change, right? And thirdly, just make a compelling and confident ask, make the case. I saw recently, and I'm sure some of you are aware of the reverse funding call. What was it called? Reverse funding for proposals, where it was NGOs putting out a call for donors rather than a donor putting out a call for proposals to implement stuff. It was the other way around. I've got this great project. Who wants to come and partner with me for money? And this is what the kind of quality of the money would look like, and turning things on their heads. I think this is a great moment to be doing more of that. That said, in the bottom section here, some of these basics of being, having your financial management basics and your financial management credibility and transparency and accountability is what I would call a hygiene factor. It by itself will not get you any money, but if it's not there, it will act as a blocker. You can have the best story and everything in the world, but if your basics of your audited accounts and whatever aren't straight and aren't right, that will cause you problems and it will get in the way of you raising money. Let's look at briefly at reserves. Adequate reserves was the third pillar. Why do we need them? How do we build them? How do we measure them? And how do we set a target? I could talk, each of these is a half a day, but I'll just rattle through a bit. Obviously, reserves help us be resilient in the face of shocks and surprises. And it's been something that I'm sure you've seen again on LinkedIn, people saying, well, these organizations have only got 3 months, they'll be out of business in 3 months. I think those must be ones in some of the global north, or 6 months. Most of the organizations I'm familiar with in Uganda would be very lucky to have 3 to 6 months of reserves. I was in an HR call with HR professionals in Uganda talking about, well, I've got to lay people off. I don't even have enough reserves to actually meet the legal requirements associated with laying people off. Will I get sued? What can I do about that? Like, it's horrendous. There's normally reserves would enable you to either get bridge funding to the next source of income, or to close down well and responsibly. And you need some money to be able to do one of those two things. So reserves are absolutely essential. I remember when I was training back in the UK, the Charity Commission used to look at the reserves of charities in the UK. And I remember they had one that had 8 years of reserves. And they said, what is that about? You're not a bank. Why are you accumulating all this money? Go out and spend it. Do stuff. Do good things according to your mission. And there was another one, a big international NGO, that had 8 days worth of reserves. And the Charity Commission rightly said, this is irresponsible. You have got to have more reserves than this. You owe it to your employees and your beneficiaries and everybody that you're working with to have more reserves, so that you can be more reliable for them. And you've got to have going concern and be able to be there for them. So it's really, really important to have them there. There's really only one way to build them, which is to get unrestricted income and not spend it. So if you have unrestricted income, but you spend it on your long-term and necessary costs, that's fine, but then you're not building your reserves. If you have restricted income, you can't hold on to it. It doesn't count as your reserve, because you can't spend it how you need to. It's not flexible. So the way that it's often measured, the way you measure your actual reserve levels in shillings, dollars, whatever, is that you take your unrestricted net assets from your balance sheet on the financial statements, and you usually say, well, I'm going to take up anything that's tied up in fixed assets. Because if my net assets, all my assets minus all my liabilities, which would include my bank balance, but also other assets and debtors and creditors, if I take that number, if I've got a chunk of that is tied up in a building, well, I can't quickly sell my building, and if I sell it, maybe I won't be able to operate anymore. So usually you take out the fixed assets when calculating what your reserves are, and you wouldn't include restricted cash balances, for example, or restricted assets either. So that's how you kind of measure what you've actually got. But then how do you set a target? And that's often expressed in a month's worth of expenditure. So if you think of your whole years of expenditure, that would be 12 months survival. And then if you took a quarter of that, well, that would be 3 months worth. So it's like, how long could you survive, keep spending at the same rate if all your income stopped? If you suddenly had no more income and you had to look at your reserves only, how long could you keep going? So it's a sort of hypothetical contingency planning type question. It's also called the survival ratio for that reason. Most literature seems to talk about 3 to 6 months, but that's a little bit arbitrary. You'd really need to look at what would be the costs of closing down, and what would be, which expenditure anyway. Well, if we were in that kind of dire situation, we would cut various things. So maybe you'd want to look at 3 to 6 months of a reduced type of expenditure rather than literally everything that you spent last year. So there's a number of nuances in how you set your target. But hopefully that's a bit helpful on the way you think about reserves. It's really helpful to have a reserves policy, and it's really helpful to look at your reserves every quarter, at least every balance sheet date, and think about your strategy for building them. They don't build themselves without a lot of difficult decisions. And usually that's like, I'm going to choose not to spend on this vital missional thing because I'm going to choose to build my reserves so that I can be fit for a shock. And that's a really difficult decision for any nonprofit to make, because you exist to do the good stuff that you do. The last thing is about stakeholder relationships, and I'm sure this is a real thing that you've been feeling. It could be a real range. So it's your first and foremost, your service users, clients, communities, beneficiaries, those stakeholders that really benefit from the work that you do. Your funders, maybe it's local businesses and banks, your suppliers, local government relationships, partner organizations, any networks you're part of, your tax authority, your auditors, and others. All of these, if you've got good, strong relationships, they can help you. Maybe you need to analyze your stakeholders and assess which ones are strong or weaker, which ones are more strategic for you to build. They can help you with quotes and endorsement. They could help you with introductions. Maybe they can provide you with credit. Maybe they can give you money. Maybe they can give you services or goods in kind. Maybe they can support with your tax status. Whatever it is, leveraging those stakeholders and thinking creatively about how they can help you in a sticky situation is very strategic. So I talked about these hygiene factors for building resilience, these financial management basics and your audited financial statements. And I want to kind of pivot to really focus in on those, because that's where I've been working in that area for the last, all my career. And that's where I think I've got some really exciting things to share. Much as these aren't going to be urgent, quick fixes, they are a vital conversation when it talks about when we're looking at local development, localization of funding, more funding to and from local organizations. So I wanted to share a couple of resources. There's the Humentum Health Check, used to be the Mango Health Check, which is still freely available. It's a brilliant place to do a sort of quick assessment of where your strengths and weaknesses are so that you know what to work on. And the Finance for Development Professionals Guide is also freely downloadable. Fantastic detailed information about how to run your finances, specifically in an NGO context. So really great free resources there. So this is things about your budgeting, your financial coding, your accounting systems, getting those basics right. And then crucially, your audited financial statements. Now, historically, these haven't been all that, it's a bit of a tick box exercise, right? It's something that has to be done, but nobody really spends too much. So what I've heard and seen, it spends too much energy on reading them in great detail, unfortunately. But they are a vital piece of building that trust and credibility, transparency and accountability. So if we think about this current context that we're in and the future that we're looking forward into, I wonder, are we entering a space where there'll be more diverse income sources rather than having all my income from 2 or 3 funders? Will I be looking to local businesses and different sources? Will I be looking to totally different business models? Will I be looking at more domestic sources and domestic philanthropy? Corporate social responsibility from local businesses. Could we be generating our own income from, say, rental or consultancies or whatever it is that's linked to our mission, but using our skills to generate income to pay for the things that don't generate income? And I think in that sort of more diversified context, it'll be interesting to think about what due diligence and assurance processes might or might not look like. Could it be more or less onerous than USAID and what we've been sort of used to as a sector? I'll give you an example. We're applying for funding from an African bank, and they're fairly new to grant making. Their grant making processes are every bit as onerous and nightmarish and problematic as any other funder that you've ever seen, even though it's a slightly different type of, and I'm not sure that businesses are going to be any good at making grants either. I'm not sure that with this diversification, we're going to see better and easier due diligence and assurance processes. We've still got a long way to go to build a system where money can flow and trust can be built in a more standardized, harmonized, systematic way, rather than every single donor having to do due diligence and assurance with every single NGO. It's exhausting for everybody and it's utterly inefficient. I also just want us to sort of do a paradigm shift about these things that aren't what we exist for, but they're so necessary to achieving our mission. Our fundraising, our financial management, our audited financial statements, and our governance become missional in the way that we have to think about them. Spending time and effort on getting them right is crucial to the sector working and to our organizations being able to deliver. And that's where I get to the thing that has kept me awake at night and awake during the day for the last 5 years, which is a new standard called the International Non-Profit Accounting Standard. And I believe very strongly, and I'm not alone, that this can be the lubricant, if you like, that enables funds to flow between those that have money and those that need it, between donor, wherever the money is coming from, and the organizations that are implementing life-saving, community-building programs can be oiled by a systematic, efficient way to build trust and credibility. So let me tell you very briefly. INPAS will be the first internationally recognized accounting standard for the sector. It's been developed to streamline the preparation of the annual audited accounts, entity-wide annual audited accounts, and also to streamline grant reports, a harmonized donor reporting format by nonprofit organizations, and it's due for publication in September. So it's really about doing more for less. It's instead of wasting 25% or whatever it is of our dollars and effort on due diligence and audits and financial reporting, where we're meeting loads and loads of different requirements, let's have one standard and get on with doing that well. And we use that to build trust. And that makes the whole sector more resilient. So for nonprofits themselves, this simplifies and standardizes the financial reporting. So it's easier to measure and manage your financial sustainability. You can't easily do that from a set of financial statements that have been built from a for-profit standard, and easier to comply with donor reporting requirements and attract quality funding. For funders, it provides confidence in the financial integrity of NPOs, facilitating more informed funding decisions and streamlined accountability for grants. And for other stakeholders as well, for auditors, you've got a clear, consistent framework which enables stronger and more reliable and consistent assurance. And for regulators, we've been talking about FATF and how regulators really want to demonstrate that they are, managing the money laundering, etc., risks that have become associated with the sector. Well, the recommendation 8 of the FATF mentions financial statements 5 times. It's like it's a really key part of that journey. So what's the link then between financial accounting standards and financial resilience? I'm not just bringing this in because I want to talk about it. I really do think that they are linked. So first of all, we talked about how talking about your impact in a succinct and compelling way is key to fundraising. Well, the INPAS standard includes the requirement to have a narrative report that accompanies the financials, because the financials on their own are meaningless without the context of what your organization is doing. So the narrative report is a great opportunity to share about what your mission is and your impact, so that and provide context for the numbers. Crucially, these financial statements will include information about unrestricted funds, unrestricted income, expenses, and fund balances, and that builds donor trust. If I want to give an unrestricted donation, I might be worried about, an unrestricted grant. How do I know what you're spending it on? Well, it's there. It'll be there clearly seen in the audited financial statements. So we don't need to have micromanagement and every donor looking over our shoulder, checking that everything's being done right, because we can see it in the audited accounts. So we can sort of de-link accountability from control and micromanagement. We get the accountability and the transparency through the audited accounts. We don't have to have all the micromanagement that sometimes comes with it. It's an internationally recognized standard, so it really will build that credibility and confidence over the financials, irrespective of which country you're in. And it means that information about reserves will be much easier to pick out from the financial statements. So you can measure your own reserves as a nonprofit, but others can also see and assess your financial health more easily. I know many donors are looking at AI analysis to speed up due diligence, and that makes it easier for AIs to read. And we can also even have databases like, if you're aware of the 990 forms that they have in the US and websites like Candid, those sorts of things really help organizations become fundable and findable, and that will become possible when we've got an international standard. So with that, OUBC, I can see you've come on to say, Sam, speed up. We're going to head into some breakout rooms, and I really want us to think about, and this is the exercise I'd like us to do in the breakout rooms. It's imagine a world where all NPOs and their stakeholders agreed on a single best practice for financial reporting, both for the entity and for grant reports. And have a think about, what would that mean? What are the actual knock-on implications? So we're going to put you in breakout rooms. In the chat, there's a link to a document. It's in English and in Portuguese, and it lists out 6 future benefits that we've been sharing and discussing on our project for the last 6 years. And what we'd like you to do is to go into your breakout rooms, say hi, have your cameras on if possible. And then in your groups, out of those 6 benefits on the sheet, just pick 2 that interest you and discuss the implications of that new reality. Really put yourself in that new world and think, what kind of a difference would that make? What would be the knock-on impacts of that reality? So you're going to be, actually, it's going to be 12 minutes, I think, once you're in the group, but just discuss 2 benefits. Don't try and discuss all 6. So first of all, can I have confirmation that the link is in the chat? And hopefully you've been able to download that link and see the Word document with the 6 benefits. Maybe somebody can give me a thumbs up that that's okay. Julie, anybody? Is it in the chat? I can't see. Can't see the link. Okay. It's not there yet. So Arnold, are you able to share the link? Or maybe it was in our practice session. Okay, I will recreate the links. That's okay. Here is a link to. Okay. Was the presentation in Portuguese shared as well? Not yet. Share that as well. Okay. So, here comes the link. There we are. So that link that's just been shared, Portuguese was shared already. Okay. So the link that's just been shared there is, we pop that into a different window on your browser. I'm just testing it. Oh, that's to the whole folder. But there's a Word document within that folder that says, imagine a world where. And that's the document that you want to open, the Word document that says, imagine a world where. Share my screen so you can see what it looks like. They're saying no link. I've seen the link in the chat. So this is what the document looks like. If you follow the link in the chat, this is what you'll see. And it has Portuguese on page 2 and English on page 1. So the 6 benefits are, imagine a world where there's NGO finance training and accounting software that's affordable and meets NPO needs. Imagine there's transparency about unrestricted funds so that current and potential donors can see. Imagine a future where there's one harmonized donor reporting format. Imagine a future where the value of in-kind donations are clear to see. So there's this extra benefit that NGOs are able to bring. Imagine a future where there are streamlined audits and due diligence, one single audit, most of the information for due diligence can come from the audited financial statements, and a future where audited financial statements can be really quickly assessed.
Samantha, the document is asking for a sign-in. The link you shared is asking for a sign-in. Do you mind making it open?
Okay. We've tested it earlier and it worked, so I'm puzzled, but let me recreate this. It should be anyone can view, anyone. This is an anyone link. It really should work. And I'll pop it in the Zoom chat. So I'm putting it in the hosts and panelists section because that's the only place that I can post it. So
Okay, it's free access now. I hope other
you can see it?
participants can. Yeah, I can see it on the host
Great.
and panelists.
Okay. Sorry about that, everybody. We did test it earlier, so I'm not sure what went wrong there, but thank you for your patience. So that link should take you to a Word document with 6 benefits. And the idea is that you get into your group. There's no moderator. There's quite a few of you in the room. There'll be about 12 or so of you in the breakout room. So you say hi to each other briefly, pick the 2 of the 6 benefits and discuss the implications. I'm going to reshare my screen here so we can see that. What difference would that make, and what would the knock-on effects be? Right. So I think we better open those breakout rooms and just have 10 minutes so we can get that discussion going. I see people are gradually joining the groups. That's good. Participants are down to 36. Still a lot of people left in this room. Please do join the, you should see something on your screen saying join the breakout room. Just meet some of your fellow participants there and have a quick conversation about the benefits. Okay. I think 22 people are still in this room. 21. So maybe some of you aren't able to join because of mobile devices or what have you. So let's just have a quick look together at some of these benefits ourselves here. And maybe you've got thoughts that you'd like to share in the chat, or you'd like to just raise your hand, and I think you could come and share a thought about which of these 6, maybe let's do it through the chat if you want, which of these 6 do you think you'd like to think about more deeply? Software and training, transparency about unrestricted funds, a harmonized donor reporting format, in-kind donations, streamlined audits, and audited financial statements easy to read. You didn't see the some people didn't see the breakout prompt. Arnold, is there anybody that is not yet assigned? If you go to more, the more button with 3 buttons, then you can click to join. You might be able to click to join a room. Okay, don't worry. If you can't go to a breakout room, then we will have a short discussion here. But do share in the chat which of those benefits seem to be things that you'd be excited about, things that would matter to you. I'll put that up again here. These are the 6 benefits that we've been hearing from around the world in recent months and years. I think it's slightly smaller so we can have them on one page. So in terms of training and software, it would be having affordable accounting software that meets NPO needs, including tracking grants, projects and funds, direct and support costs. And hopefully we could have also training and professional qualifications for accountants that's really relevant to the nonprofit sector. The second one is about transparency about unrestricted funds, where current and potential donors can see how unrestricted funds are spent. So that financial statements really clearly distinguish between the surplus and deficit on restricted funds versus that on unrestricted funds. And the board and members can also measure and set targets for appropriate levels of sustainability reserves. I'm quite excited about that. I'm really excited. In Uganda, I've often seen struggles with the URA. You see a surplus on the financial statements, the revenue authority, that is the tax authority. And they think, oh, surplus, that means profit. That means that you've got money that we can tax, because they're not seeing the difference between restricted and unrestricted. Whereas that could really help create a sort of grown-up conversation between tax authorities and the nonprofit sector about tax exemption. The third one, I think, is the thing I'm most excited about, which is a harmonized donor reporting format, where most grantors are using the same high-level expenditure headings for their budgets and financial reports. And even you, when you're developing your own budgets to apply for grants, you can use a standard set of expense type headings, which then is recognized and accepted by all different funders, making the grant reporting much, much easier. NPOs can show donors the true costs of projects as well. So where the overheads that were covered by a donor were this much, but here's the amount that we had to cover ourselves, which can provide better information for negotiating fairer contribution. I want to see if there's anything in the chat. Ernest, can you see comments in the chat? No comments. Is anybody in this room? Do share if you've got some thoughts about these. Are these resonating? Are these things that you'd like to see in the future? Are they challenges that you currently face that you can imagine being better in this new world? Love to hear your thoughts.
Samantha, you didn't join your group?
And those that don't support the harmonized, and the reason why we don't, because I can clearly see the group get divided. The those that support and the those that don't support, and they're all valid reasons. Okay. Well, from what I understood from the last comments is that we're all in agreement for financial reporting in particular, because it will make our organizations more efficient. and reduce burden. Would anyone else like to comment about the harmonized donor reporting format for financial reporting, or shall we move on to another point? Good afternoon. Hello. Hello, Christina. Hi, yeah. I think
Oh, it was interesting being able to listen into that group.
That was
And
group
also
three.
with the
That's group
financial
three. I wanted you to join in and listen.
attract more collaborations,
We can hear, it's fine, let's just listen in.
more donors to the organization. And also it shows as a live wire of an organization that the organization is running and their transparency. Thank you. But what would be the advantage of having a harmonized format or disadvantage? The disadvantage of it is that it will allow people to know what one has, how the organization is highly worthy. Their financial reports that will not be hidden. But the advantage is that it will attract more people to trust the organization and to partner, and also attract more funders to the organization. And also it increased the integrity and showed the transparency, the owner of the organization. Anyone else? Any comment? Okay, which of the other 5 remaining points would we like to discuss? NGO finance training and accounting software, transparency about unrestricted funds, the value of in-kind donations, streamlined audits. Hello? Acting. Very identity too. So I would agree that we're going with transparency and then but unrestricted fund and then the harmonized report, or if we have other alternatives, and bring them up. Discuss.
For me, it's okay. For me, it's okay. So that we don't have time.
Okay, so we are talking about harmonized transparency. Different donors. And so if that is done, if it is done, then it kind of cuts on the time, it cuts on the turnaround time for the funding, it cuts the also builds trust. So including building trust would also really work for that. Yeah.
Thank you, Josephine. Anyone want to add? Especially on harmonized one?
In the harmonized section, is there a way that it can also help in cash flow projections and other things? But in order to put this harmonized process together, timing is also very, very important.
So you say timing, what does that mean?
Ahmed, the entire process is the time scheduling of all the processes in the harmonized this thing.
Okay. Is there anyone? We've already left 3 minutes to close this breakout session.
Can I just say something about the transparency about unrestricted funding?
Okay.
Yeah, I think if there's harmonized, everything is harmonized and streamlined, then of course it increases the transparency. When there's transparency, there's increased trust, and I think one of the reasons why there's a lot of restricted funding is because of limited trust, and everyone believing in their own system, think their system is better than the others. So the conversations must happen at different levels, and those coalitions must be built to a certain level that even as we're building the transparency, what's the other side willing to give up to be able to build that transparency in order to create unrestricted funding base. I also think that the focus on strongly saying let's report, and at times even reporting on indicators that are not used, is part of being not trusting the people that you're working with. So I think there are a lot of things that need to be really discussed around that to build the transparency, build the database for unrestricted funding, create that streamlined audits, due diligence that is all believed in. But each person must be willing to give up and believing in the other person's system and not thinking their system is the best, or creating a system as Ms. Musoki was presenting.
Okay, I think our time is almost done, completed. So let's go back to our
Samantha, back to you.
Super, thank you so much. I think that is everybody back in the main room, or some people are still coming from the breakouts, huh? It usually takes a second or two. Brilliant. Brilliant.
They're all back, Samantha.
They're all back. Wonderful. That was quick. So I would love to get some feedback. We've got a poll here, which you can I hope you, first of all, I hope you had some really rich conversations. I wish I'd been in all those rooms and heard the different thoughts. Hopefully by discussing with each other, it's helped you think through some of the implications, some of the challenges and difficulties. Nobody's pretending this, again, is a super simple, quick, magic solution, but it's something that can have hopefully some significant ecosystem, sector-wide impact on building trust. So if you can get your phone and point your camera at the screen, at that QR code, it should take you to a form. And I'll also copy the link and put it in the Zoom chat, or anybody can. And hopefully we can see some of your thoughts about what are the most which of the benefits would be valuable for your MPO, and it's tick any that apply. So you can just tick things that you think would make a real difference. And we'll see which areas people care about most. The link is in the chat, or you can do it via the QR code. Oh, excellent. I've seen at least one vote so far. And then if you'd like to put any of your, if there were questions or comments that came in while you were doing that chatting, that conversation, please put them in the Q&A section of the Zoom platform. so that we can hear those comments and questions at the end. Sometimes just by chatting things through, it brings things to mind that we would really love to hear. About 8 responses so far to the poll. You have to click submit at the end, by the way, so you can tick your items and then click the submit button, and that makes it come through. I have a couple more responses. So what I'm seeing right now, the 21% means that 21% of all the votes was for number 1. It's not 21% of people. This is about the percentage of all the votes cast. So it's just like which ones are highest. So the relevant and affordable finance training and software has come up pretty high. The number 3, the harmonized headings for grant reports is next. The number 5, the streamlined due diligence and assurance would be a great win. And then the lower ones are, so 1, 3, and 5 are coming out as the top issues. Which is super. So I'm going to shorten the second part of my thing very, very briefly to say that I wanted to show you the 2 diagrams. This is kind of what we've got at the moment, where on the left is our whole of entity general purpose financial reports, which are different from each other and not very useful to a range of stakeholders. And on the right, we have our special purpose grant reports, which are slightly different for every funder, and they're not linked. That line down the middle shows that there's no fundamental linkage. There can be different periods, different currencies, different headings that mean that I've been an auditor for many years, and it's not always easy or possible at all to reconcile a funder report to the main ledger overall. And it's easy to put the same costs into different grant reports. Of course, none of you would do that, but donors are worried about that. And of course, it does happen sometimes, that doubled funding fraud. So what we're looking to with INPAS and the new harmonized donor reporting format is that we have a standard set of financial statements that are useful to a broad range of users, not just donors. Let's think about what's useful to us, not just our donors. And we have a harmonized set of headings for our funder reports, which of course the funders need to agree to. But the win for them, the reason why they would harmonize, it's not just because they're doing it out of the love of their hearts and they think it's a good idea for the sector. They need to have a win in order to change. And that's this bridge. We get a linkage to the general purpose financial statements, which gives much better assurance. So this is effectively how the standard itself and this in the practice guide 1, it's what it's called, for supplementary statements for donor reporting. That's how these 2 link together. This is the format for the standard grant report, and these are the headings, expenditure headings. So you've got direct expenses, and then employment, travel and subsistence, supplies and materials, running costs, external services and other services in kind of gifts in kind and grants payable or grants made to others, and then support costs as a separate line, optionally. These headings have not just been made up by us, this based on actually 10 years of work with a large group of donors to harmonize the usual headings in most grant reports. And we have got engagement from a number of donors, including a donor statement of support on our website. And we've had a huge amount of input from stakeholders all over the world in coming up with the standard and the proposals. So with that, I would like to say just the calls to action, the things you can do now. This will be published until October, September. But what you can do now is demonstrate your support if you believe this is a good thing for the sector and being able to create a future that's more fit for purpose. Then please share your logo or your name on the website. You can sign up for monthly emails. You can contact your country champion. We have, I think, 38 different countries have a champion and are setting up national working groups to look at adoption in your different countries. You can learn more about it. There's lots of resources on the website, and you could even speak to your auditor about it. Those are some things you can do. So let me stop there and hand back over to BC. Sorry, I've gone over time. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Samantha, and thanks for telling us that never waste a crisis, and it's a good time for us to start thinking about adequate reserves as well. Thank you very much for that very brilliant presentation, and also to all the participants for joining the breakout rooms and for talking through what kind of work they would like to see. Let me now quickly move to my brother, Ernest Yimai, who would be taking us through the experience with shrinking funding, the shrinking funding space, and also how locally funded initiatives can help us all at this time. I'll also let Ernest introduce himself, and over to you.
Thank you, Master of Ceremonies, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, colleagues. And I want to also extend my warm welcome to you for joining this very important call. Let me also start off by appreciating the Civic Advisor Hub and also the Umendam for organizing this timely webinar where we are facing a lot of uncertainties as non-profit sector or as NGOs. So in the interest of time, I'm just going to focus more on some of the experiences, and I'm going to share more about the Zimbabwean context, which is something that I'm very much conversant with in terms of some of the experiences. But I think what I got from Samantha's presentation, and thank you for a very elaborate presentation in terms of the basics around issues of financial sustainability and resilience. It's quite unfortunate, like you mentioned, that we are having some of these conversations while it's sort of late because of the circumstances that we are finding ourselves in. So what I got from what you have presented, which is also a reality that we can all resonate with, is we are living a time of uncertainty as non-profit sector. And some of our organizations are actually facing existential threats as funding is continuing to shrink and dwindle. And what we are also witnessing is that funding priorities are dramatically changing due to various global economic shifts, geopolitical dynamics, and even evolving donor priorities that we are also witnessing. And again, this is posing an existential threat in terms of NGOs, especially those that are donor dependent in terms of their funding base. And to add a layer to that is also to recognize that even governments are also tightening the financial regulations around CSO funding, which is also contributing even to donor apathy and also donor fatigue in certain jurisdictions, where some partners are actually no longer interested to continue to partner with countries, with civil society or NGOs in those particular countries due to the repressive legislations that are being introduced and promulgated. And this is mainly often under the guise of national security issues, transparency and compliance, and maybe just to also make reference to even issues of the global standards such as the Financial Action Task Force, where we have seen that shrinking civic space has been one of the unintended consequences of countries trying to comply with this recommendation 8, and also this has even led to the review of the recommendation 8 itself and its interpretive notes. So in my view, I think this is a wake-up call to both us as non-profit sector, but also even to the government in terms of our financial sustainability strategies. I think it's high time that we need to take this particular subject as something that anger our operations and our work as non-profit sector. I think we are also seeing growing emphasis on issues of mutual interest, especially from most of the donors and funders, where they are now prioritizing those sort of partnerships that align with their strategic goals, with their foreign policies, and also even with their needs and demands as donors. And I think it's now more of a paradox between needs-based approaches versus demand-driven, models in terms of their funding. So let me now just share a bit around some of the experiences for Zimbabwe. And I will not necessarily focus only on the recent USAID, but I think what we have been experiencing as a country over the past decade has been indications of a revolutionary shift in terms of the funding landscape. So I think generally what we have been facing is the shrinking funding space. And one of the reasons has been issues of donor fatigue, where certain donors were actually closing, or some of the donors were now going elsewhere. And I can make reference to donors such as OSISA, Freedom House, Irish Aid. These are some of the donors that have been supporting most of our organizations in the country. And we have also seen shifting in terms of even priorities. I can give an example of in the health sector, where we have seen most of the donors that were supporting issues of HIV response moving away from home-based care, palliative care, sort of models and interventions into medical-based care. So those are some of the experience in terms of the donor shift, which has led to some of the non-profit organizations closing, because perhaps they've lacked, adaptive capacity to really adjust and respond to the evolvements, leading to their closure, and also leading to some of the operational challenges that they were actually facing. We have also seen economic downturns and inflationary pressures in terms of the economic condition and environment of the country, also contributing to shrinking funding space. And what we have seen has been loss of funds. For some of the donors, they end up, introducing additional safeguarding measures because, the monetary policy environment was no longer conducive for them to continue support civil society, and also in terms of the risk that was associated with their funding. So we have seen some donors actually introducing, very tight conditions in terms of NGOs or non-profit organizations accessing the funds. And then as a result, we have seen shrinking in the funding space. Issues of restrictive legislations, again, has also contributed to donor fatigue, and also even to apathy in certain instances, where some of the laws and some of the policies that were introduced were actually resulting in some sort of impediments in terms of a non-profit organization being able to do the work. And, when the resources are dwindled, one of the issues that is also normally prominent is issues to do with unhealthy competition for the limited resources from the sector itself. So in terms of our experience, again, maybe just also to share about the USAID experience, I think many of our organizations in the country have been historically dependent on international donors, especially the USAID as the biggest funder rather in the country. From the indicative figures that are currently in the public domain, it shows that for the funding cuts that have been confirmed so far, it's amounting to around 522 million US dollars. And if you look at that in terms of its cuts across different sectors, stretching from humanitarian support, health, issues of democracy and governance, and human rights work. And if we are trying to also check this versus the national budget, our national budget as a country, 4.5 billion is enough for us to sustain our operations or to fund our programs per year as a country. So that accounts to something like even 7%. So you can see the effects of some of these new measures that we are seeing, and the evolvements in the funding dynamics. We have also witnessed challenges with regards to short-term funding cycles, which normally comes with tighter, funding conditionalities, where most of our organizations in the country are actually receiving project-based or activity-based micro grants, which in most cases it has no or very little institutional support. And then in terms of sustainability, these organizations have not been really sustaining themselves because of the bearing that it has in terms of staff retention, issues of skills retention as well. We have also seen, diminished donor interest in some of the sectors. Like in the recent past, we have seen most of the donors, they are no longer interested in issues of democracy, governance, and human rights. And I think probably this also because of some of the perpetual challenges that what we continue to see in terms of human rights situation in the country, in terms of some of the governance issues that the country has been facing for quite a long time now. So this has resulted in reduced the funding in some of those critical sectors, which most of our organizations were actually programming around. And we have seen these organizations now shifting towards issues of climate change, issues of economic sectors where there are mutual interest, especially with the donors, such as energy sector, agriculture sector, and also even in the area of economic growth sector as well. So just to share around issues of local philanthropy and private sector engagement, it's one of the ways that some of our members and organizations are actually exploring. But you know, the challenge that we are facing is around the political dynamics of the country, where you actually find that the people or the business people and the captains of industry are people who are politically exposed, you know. So sometimes because of the negative publicity that is there, and you know, different names that are being attached to civil society, like the regime change agents, they are not really comfortable in associating with the sector. So issues of local philanthropy, I think it really looks at issues of, you know, the context in which you are operating. Because in some jurisdictions, it's very difficult for business people to actually associate and to deal and to partner with you. And also, as a result, what we've been seeing, some of the major business entities like banks, they've been establishing their own foundations that they are now using even to advance issues of corporate social responsibility. And again, the same challenge is also true when you look at issues of social enterprising, where some NGOs have been trying and exploring ways of, you know, venturing in income generating projects. But the challenges has been around the economic environment that we operate with, where there are a lot of, challenges. The economic climate of the country is not quite favorable. And also issues of ease of doing business, even for those that are entrepreneurs, they are actually facing challenges. So sometimes those initiatives are not then giving very much needed support in terms of the return in terms of the income that is being generated to then match the expenses, like what Samantha was saying, to say whatever you then mobilize as untied reserve should matching the expenses that will then help you to continue doing the work. And community-based fundraising, I think we look at the level of development. Like if you look at 2024, I think we registered only 2% growth as a country. So again, for you to come up with the community-based ways of resource mobilization, where people, about 42% of our population, they are estimated to be living under the poverty datum line. It's not quite, you know, easy for you to really mobilize the resources with that. But I think the idea now is to make sure that probably you then invest in community system strengthening, so that there are cost-effective measures that you then use to do your operations and your programs. Government grants is one of the way. In our, unfortunately, if you look at our context, it's quite difficult. For instance, we are a country that is in a debt distress, and right now the amount of money that is required to service the debt is actually much more higher than what we need as a country to even fund our social sectors, cumulatively health, education, and social protection. So the government is not in a position even to explore other ways, such as issues of social contracting. I think it's quite difficult because of the debt distress that we have. So some of the other measures has been a consortium building, and also trying to share resources as civil society, you know, as a way of mobilizing resources collectively, and then use those resources to really advance your cause as different organizations. But the challenge has been the modalities, where in certain instances it appears like some of the partnerships are more like marriages of convenience, as opposed to, you know, a strategic fitness sort of a consortium, where you have organizations with different capacities and competitive advantage coming together. But sometimes people are ending up in those consortiums not based on the different strengths that they have and the strategic fitness. And also maybe just also to share issues of big brother mentality and power dynamics at play, where sometimes consortiums are being formed, but in terms of the implementation now, sometimes the organization do not have equal power to then determine what to do, even in terms of resource sharing, resulting in other organizations pulling out of some of these partnerships. So those are some of the things that, actually, in the current environment, we need to think about closely and see how best we can address such, and even adopt things such as use of flex hours for staff, part-time, so that at least we are able to maintain. But looking at the figures, I think one of the key recommendations that I am making, especially to other colleagues coming from countries that have got almost a similar context with us, is you need to streamline your organizational structure. I think one of the recommendations is we have to downsize, and those are some of the things that we really need to think about. But lastly, maybe just to say, or just to encourage colleagues, is to say, I don't think it's time for us to put the tools down. We really need to continue reaffirming our commitment to adapt and thrive, even despite some of these financial constraints. They are there to test the very foundation of the purpose of civil society, and we need to connect. And these shifts are not necessarily challenges. Otherwise, in my view, they present also an opportunity for us as CSOs to evolve in a more self-reliant way, locally anchored, and also community accountable organizations that serve the needs of its communities. Thank you. So over to you, facilitator.
Yes, thank you so much, Ernest, for helping us to again further understand that the consequences of what is happening now goes beyond budgets. We're seeing misinformation followed by backlash. We're also seeing government harassment and also new restrictions that are targeting civil society. I thought I should flag that because it connects so well with the report I cited at the start of this session around the mapping that we've done within the EUC on the impact of the aid courts. But again, there are questions. Please, colleagues, if you have questions that you want to ask us, please type them in the Q&A. Don't forget that Samantha's presentation is already in the chat box as well. I'll now take the questions as I have them coming in. Thanks to Julie for supporting me with that. You've heard from Samantha, who is project director at Momentum, and also from Ernest, who is also the executive director at NGO. And now we'll take the Q&A. Please don't forget to share questions directly on the Q&A chat box. The first question I have is from Enoch, and he's asking what funding opportunities exist through regional development banks and non-traditional donors. Samantha, you want to pick that? Then Ernest can also contribute to that.
I'll let Ernest go first and I'll go second, if that's okay.
Okay. Ernest, you have some thoughts on what Enoch wants to know? Opportunities funding that exist through regional development banks and non-traditional donors.
Okay, thank you for that question. So what I would say is in the past 5 or so years, we have seen banks, for example, the African Development Bank, establishing what they call civil society funds. And these were more like, structured in a way of philanthropy support to organizations that are doing different community work. But we have also seen a keen interest from the banks on issues of research, as opposed to actual community work on the ground, where I think for them, the interest has been around using that information to inform their priorities as banks to then support even countries through, multilateral and bilateral agreements. So I think that's what I can say. We haven't really seen a lot in terms of partnering with NGOs, especially in our country. We have seen those banks partnering more with the academic, fields like the universities to do mainly research. And then they have been informing some of their development cooperation frameworks and some of the things. But in certain countries, the issue of unserviced debt has been also a disadvantage, where even where there are pockets of resources to benefit the non-profit organizations, our countries sometimes are not eligible on the basis that the country has not been able to meet its obligations in terms of debt servicing. Yeah, so that's what I can comment on that, but maybe some other can also come in.
Yeah, thank you so much. Samantha, let me link your response to that first question to this second one. And Ima is asking, the accounting software, we were wondering how affordable as grassroots organizations might still not be able to access it. Also would like it if it was multilingual. So I'm reading this directly.
Yes.
So please connect it and do that in 30 seconds, please.
Okay, on alternative funding sources, I don't think there's any obvious answers, but I think local businesses, we obviously our countries don't have lots of people under the poverty line. We also have rich people in all our countries. There's big gaps in that. So I think reaching out to high net worth individuals and successful businesses within our countries and economies is something we shouldn't overlook. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not pretending it's easy. On the software, there is no sort of one software that we will be issuing. We're sort of effectively acting as a standard setter. But literally in the next couple of days, I'm sending out a survey to find out which packages are most commonly used so that we can support with guidance on how to configure software to help it meet the requirements of INPAS. And I know that already I'm aware of 3 projects underway to develop software that's specifically targeted at Global South NGOs, because they realize it's a huge market that is underserved. And with INPAS standard, it creates a market that's worth it for those companies to invest in that technology. So I'm very hopeful that we'll have something that is affordable and relevant and user-friendly, because the market will make it.
Excellent, excellent. And I'm glad that, you're optimistic about that. Robert Kakuru would like to know, how does the shrinking global donor landscape affect localization agenda? Who wants to try? Samantha, Ernest, you want to hit the ground running?
I'll have a first go. Who knows? I think the answer is let's wait and see. Personally, I kind of oscillate. I think it's actually a huge opportunity moment for the localization agenda, however we want to frame it. I think it's a huge opportunity for locally led organizations to take center stage and to show how they can do things without those big funders. I don't know. It's a hugely difficult question. I don't think that it parks that conversation. It certainly doesn't. All of those important conversations that have been happening over the last decade are more important than ever now. Quite what direction that takes, I will let Ernest predict.
Yeah, maybe before Ernest takes that up, let me add this question to it for you, Ernest, so that you can just, Yaya Daniel would like to know, my question majors on what, with the international funding challenges and with the poverty level in our various local communities, what possible model can one apply to meet the organization's planned objectives and add value to lives?
Okay, thank you for that question. So I fully agree with you, Samantha, on your perspective around the issue of localization. I think what we're experiencing now in terms of the shift in the funding landscape is a timely reminder that we need to take the localization agenda more seriously and try to ensure that there is progress. I think of course, it also comes with some negatives in terms of some donors pulling out, because I want to focus on the grand bargain commitments, for instance. The issue of channeling resources to the local responders, which are most jurisdictions we are referring to the local organizations, but not only transferring resources, but also skills and capacity. So what I think is one of the probably immediate loss might be that opportunity for us to really gain that, those skills and also, benefit in terms of capacity strengthening. But nevertheless, I don't think we have requisite capacity amongst ourselves. So it's time for us to really work together, trying to build each other's capacity so that, going forward, we take ownership of our own development and our own needs as different organizations. And that's pretty much what the localization agenda seeks to achieve. So I think it's high time that we really need to expedite whatever we can do around the agenda. Then on the issue of what can we do in economically constrained environment. I think one of my honesty suggestion is we also need to have very frank conversations with our duty bearers, our governments, and even the private sector to say, look, these are some of the areas that we were filling in, complementing your efforts as development actors. But for now, as we are navigating this evolving funding landscape, we really appeal to you that you take some of those initiatives, to also implement. But try and probably propose it to be in a partnership, because we are the ones that have started some of the development initiatives. So it might be good for us to adopt, in practice, the whole of society approach of making sure that the different actors are now coming together without, deduplicate initiatives, so that at least the cost that is needed for us to meet some of those requirements in terms of the work that we've been doing can be met. And then, of course, we are still learning. We are still, seeing how best we can adapt to the environment. And eventually, I think we'll be able to sustain the development impact that we have realized so far. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Ernest, and thanks, Robert, for reminding us that we do not build capacities, we share capacities. And I think I like that. That connects so well with the localization conversation. This would be the last one before we've really spent some time. But Ernest, this is for you. With the shifting global funding trends, which areas do the current funders have interest in? I think this is a direct question for you as the director of NGO.
Okay, I will speak for Zimbabwe. What we are seeing is it seems like most of the donors are moving away from democracy and governance work. Issues of transparency and accountability, and they are moving to support issues of livelihoods, issues of economic sectors like energy, agriculture, those that are really developmental instead of advocacy work. We are also seeing interest in issues of mining as well. We are seeing some of the donors really shifting towards that. So I would say, in my own assessment, the main area which is probably suffering at the moment is the area of democracy and governance, in terms of the numbers and figures around resource allocations and donor priorities.
Thank you so much for that. If you have any more question, I can pick that before I go back to my panelists for some closing thoughts. Any more question? And Julie, are you also ready to give us some thoughts on why we're doing this? Again, don't forget. Okay, I see your hand. Don't forget that we have presentations from Samantha already on on the chat. Josephine, I'd like to listen to your voice for 1 minute, please. Ask your question directly and we can, begin to wind down. Josephine, please unmute.
Thank you very much, moderator. I think I raised my hand by mistake. I was just navigating through the different icons, but I put it by mistake. Thank you very much. Over.
Okay, thank you so much, Josephine. That makes my life even better the more. Thank you for saving time. Okay, so I see Christiana. Christiana, I'll give you the privilege and then we can round up this phase of the Q&A. Christiana, please, 30 seconds, if you can do that, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon to my boss, Mr. Sheyi. Thank you, sir, for what you are doing. We appreciate you. Thank you for making us to be happy. But my problem or my challenge is that since I've been running my NGO, I've not seen grants. How will I access grants? I base in Oyo State, Nigeria. We are this, even Oyo Town. I am supervised about 3 local government women. So I need assistance, I need collaboration. Thank you, especially to my boss, Mr. Sheyi.
Yeah, thank you so much. I didn't see that coming, but thank you so much for your kind words. And I'm sure thoughts from either Samantha or Ernest would be helpful at this time. Do you want to provide some guidance as we round up, either of my panelists, on how she can get funding? I'm sure I'll take this up bilaterally with her as well, yeah.
I confess I don't have much to advise. I'm stumped. I feel your pain. Let me just say that. I think it's not an easy environment. I wouldn't pretend to offer any solutions, I'm afraid.
Ernest?
I think Mr. Oyebisi, you are the one who is better placed to give you advice from a Nigerian experience than us. How are you managing yourself?
Absolutely, and I totally agree with you. But we would have to again look at the context, look at the themes, and see whether what she actually need would be grants, or we would have to do some crowdfunding or individual giving strategies for that. So we'll have to speak bilaterally, madam. But thanks a lot for flagging that, and it speaks to some of the conversations that we've had here today, that this is not just about recovering from a crisis. It's about rethinking how we build resilient, diversified, and trusted funding ecosystem for civil society as a whole. Let me hand over now to Julie as we round up to tell us why we're doing this and why we want to continue to do this. Julie, please, you have the mic.
Thank you so much, Oyebisi. Thank you for the great work. I hope I'm clear. I hope everyone is hearing me clearly.
Loud and clear. Loud and clear,
Yes,
Julie.
I have the very difficult task of keeping everyone's attention while everyone is tired, so I'll be very brief. First of all, thank you so much. I would like to thank all the panelists and our moderator for doing such a great job. Allow me to briefly talk about the Leaders Talk. This is an initiative by the Civic Advisory Hub. It is designed to foster meaningful engagement between civil society organizations, government interagencies, sector regulators, and other civil society key stakeholders at large. So essentially, it is a platform for dialogue and collaboration where we bring subject matters like we did today, subject matter experts like we did today, to share knowledge, practical skills, solutions to civic space needs, which is in alignment to CAR's mission, which is context-driven solutions for civic society. So I would agree, I think most of you would agree with me that today's discussion, building financial resilience for NGOs, is one of those emerging issues of the sector, which is why this discussion was very timely. And so I would like to extend our very sincere appreciation to Humentum, to our speakers, Ms. Samantha Musoke. Thank you so much. I'm sure it was everyone thought it as edifying and insightful as I did. I would like to thank Mr. Ernest Nyumai of Nango, Zimbabwe. Thank you so much. And Mr. Oyebisi, while he's our moderator today, he's also the executive director of the Nigeria Network of NGOs, and they have been supporters of CAR, so have Nango. And this has been made possible by support from our donors, the Moat and Ford Foundations. And to the participants, thank you so much for honoring the invite. Thank you for sharing widely. Thank you for the participation up until now. We know we are a bit over time and there were some glitches somewhere, but we will do better. So the TLT conversations are there every month. If you want to have updates on when the next one is, if you want to contribute, if you want to share on the emerging issues of the civil society like we mentioned, please drop us an email or share your email in the chat. We'll get in touch with you. You can follow us on all our social media platforms, Civic Advisory Hub. Send us an email. There's an email, reply email we shared, I believe, when we sent out the links for registration. Yeah. Allow me to close the webinar with those few words. Actually, not close, but I'll let the moderator. I don't want to take over your work. So thank you so much, everyone, and thank you again, the panelists. And
thank you so much, Julie.
Sorry, Oyebisi, can we have all the? Oh, I guess you're all here. I was going to say, can we have even the? Oh, apologies. Allow me to thank the tech team. The behind the scenes team has been doing quite a bit of running around. Thank you so much, Arnold. Thank you, Hilda. Thank you to our team leader, Yona. They have put in a lot to make sure this was a success. So thank you so much. If you don't mind sharing your screens, we would like to have a group photo. Arnold, Hilda, and the other team. the rest of the team that's still on.
Okay, so while the pictures are going on, let's save some time. And again, thank everyone. But I think one key takeaway that
It's
we all
done.
can agree to. Oh, good, done. Thank you. One key takeaway that we all can agree to is that we now need emergency financial support. We need better donor coordination. And we also need more long-term flexible funding mechanisms for civil society. And this connects so well with, the report I mentioned from the EUC survey, but also nicely with all of the things you've heard from my panelists, from Ernest, whom we thank so much for his time, and also Samantha for taking us through that conversation. And I like that around what's it called? I like to phrase it more properly. Adequate reserves. That stuck with me. And thank you so much for sharing your thoughts around the quantity and quality of income as well. But also, a conversation around the accounting standard, the international accounting standard for nonprofits. This is one area that I think we all should mobilize around. On that note, let me thank colleagues who have also supported us, the IT team, Giona, Julie, and also the over 60 participants that I saw at some point. Thank you for joining this conversation. The conversation continues, but what I do know is that whatever the moment looks like, hope and optimism remains our guiding light. Enjoy the rest of the day, and bye-bye.